I'm Miss Whitaker, and I'm an earth science teacher in New York State. And today I'll be reviewing the scientific method along with a very easy lab in order to practice the scientific method. So scientists are actually moving away from the scientific method because we really don't follow a hard set of rules in the field. It's more flexible than the scientific method makes it seem. So we're moving away from that idea, but the scientific method does give us a framework to work with. So I think it's still a relevant thing to talk about. The first part of a scientific method procedure is to start with an observation. That's using the 5 senses to collect data about your environment. So things that you can see, taste, hear, feel, and the like. Direct observation does not include any interpretation at all. You're just collecting the data at that point. The next step is to ask a question. Why is something a certain way? That's going to guide your investigation, and throughout your investigation, you're trying to answer that question. After the question, you then form a hypothesis. That's really an inference, making an assumption on why you think that observation is taking place. From there, you perform an experiment, test out what you think is happening. From that part, you can then make a conclusion. If your conclusion is correct, if your hypothesis matches your results, you can sum up by saying that your hypothesis was correct, that in fact this happens because of this reason. If your conclusion does not match your hypothesis, if your results are not a match, then you can go back and test something else. The reason we do that, the reason why we pick out certain explanations is because it helps us to focus our study. If we keep it broad, we'll be all over the place. So trying to answer our question first sort of guides our investigation down the road. So one of the labs that I do in my classroom to help show this point is one called Lake Nyos. The mysterious deaths of Lake Nyos and Lake Manaun. Really good lab to sort of start the year off, get students thinking and engaged in some things, makes you really think about what could have possibly happened in this real life case. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that show what actually happened and how they have remediated the situation since. So it's a great gateway into the rest of the science course, whether it's earth science or even chemistry, really any science course it can apply. So I'm just going to spend one moment going over what the lab is like for those of you that are actually doing the lab. For the rest of you, just hold tight. I'll be showing you the demonstration in just a moment. So the lab begins with an outline of what happened in the case. It presents the original issue and what's going on in the communities. From there, students flip towards the back, and if you go to the pack with the maps on it, it'll ask the students to read the characteristics of the lakes as well as some observations recorded on the dates of the instance. And on the back of the lab, the students choose 3 observations from those given, things collected using the 5 senses, and then using their own background information, they come up with inferences to try to explain why those observations happened. I always emphasize that your inferences don't have to be correct, they just need to be relevant to what the case is talking about. So saying that a large number of people have died near Lake Nyos and Manaun due to a hurricane wouldn't make sense in this case, because all of my observations have to do with the water, the air, rumblings, possibly some earthquakes, no mention of any kind of weather. From there, we go back to the front, and students outline the steps of the scientific method using the observations that identify the problem. On the next page, they go into asking questions, forming a hypothesis, trying to answer that question, describing what other kind of information they would need, then running a quick experiment, which you'll see in just a moment, and then putting those final pieces together, and finally answering a few analysis questions. So let's get to that demo. So let's get to the lab. The gist of the story is that a large number of people, we're talking thousands, have died, and nobody understands why. And when this event happened in the early to mid-80s, it was true. All these people were dead, and no one knew why. So this brief experiment will create the circumstances similar to what took place at Lakes Manaun and Nyos, both located in Cameroon, Africa. So what I have here is between 50 and 25 milliliters of vinegar and about an equal amount of baking soda. So we have an acid and we have a base. If you've ever done a volcano for a science project, you've probably mixed these 2 things together and seen the reaction that takes place. Well, when you combine an acid and a base together, vinegar and baking soda in this case, the end result is carbonic acid, and then from there it stabilizes into water and carbon dioxide. So I have a flame in front of me, so if I make this reaction happen, it's really easier if you pour the vinegar into the baking soda because you have a little bit more control. You'll see it fizz up, and before the reaction is done, I just tilt it towards the candle, and the candle goes out. because as we know, flame needs oxygen in order to stay lit, and the carbon dioxide, being more dense than the oxygen, forces the oxygen away, and the flame goes out. So from there, we can make the connection to what happened at Lake Nyos and Lake Manaum. A volcanic vent in the bottom of the lakes released a large amount of carbon dioxide. They believe that carbon dioxide was held in the bottom of the lake by the pressure of the water above it. Over time, that pressure builds up, the carbon dioxide begins to move up. As it goes up, pressure is released, and it's like opening a shaken up soda can. It just explodes. There's fountains of water and reports of bubbling coming from the lake before everyone passed out or maybe passed away. The carbon dioxide is then released from the lake. Being more dense than the oxygen, it sort of bulldozes its way across the land, forces the oxygen out of the area, and when surrounded by carbon dioxide, it would cause people to pass out or even die. So this demonstration illustrates similar things that happen inside the Earth, with the volcanic vents releasing gases and other substances from the Earth, and how those substances can impact people. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again.